When I was in 11th grade at a small public high school on the outskirts of Eugene, Oregon, I joined the band class. At my school, band class was known as one of the easiest ways to get an A. The options were limited to just 3: band, orchestra, or choir. I chose band because the schedule was more flexible and laid back. Our band teacher, Mr. Nicholson, was a calm and somewhat indifferent guy. His grading system was simple. As long as you showed up for class and attended your weekly lesson at least once a week, you'd get an A. But if you skipped more than one lesson without a valid excuse, your grade could drop. And that's what happened to me. I missed 2 sessions, and my grade immediately dropped to a B. I met with Mr. Nicholson after class to ask for a chance to make up the missed lessons. At first, he seemed hesitant, but eventually he agreed, on the condition that I practice in the music storage room during lunch break. His office was in the basement of the music building. He said the room was rarely used but had a music stand and enough space to practice. I was pretty happy about that. Honestly, I was probably going to spend the time on my phone instead of actually practicing. But showing up was enough to make up the credit. The next day during lunch, I went down to the basement of the music building. I brought my saxophone and entered through the side door that led directly to the staircase. That basement always had a strange atmosphere. The lighting was dim, the walls were made of old concrete, and most of the space was used to store broken instruments, old costumes, and decorations from past events. Both sides of the hallway were lined with small rooms, maybe about 2 by 2 meters each. I'd seen a few open before. Inside were just stacks of chairs or broken drums. I picked one of the rooms, went inside, and closed the door. I placed some sheet music on the stand just in case Mr. Nicholson showed up. But really, I just planned to sit and play on my phone for a while before heading back to class. I leaned against the wall and started gaming on my phone. Then suddenly, all the lights went out. Total darkness. The only light came from my phone screen. I immediately stood up and felt along the wall for the light switch. I pressed it over and over, but nothing happened. I opened the door, hoping some light would spill in from the hallway. But the hall was pitch black too. I turned on my phone screen and held it up to light the way. My phone at the time was an old model, probably an iPhone 3G, so it didn't have a built-in flashlight. But the screen's glow was just enough to see to the end of the hallway. One of the doors down there was open, and then I heard something being dragged into that room. Like a large plastic container being dragged across the concrete floor. Then came heavy breathing and a low groan. I froze. My phone was still lit in my hand, but I turned off the screen. I slowly stepped back into the room and gently closed the door. I didn't know why I was so scared. It could have just been a janitor or a teacher. But something about the way that sound happened right after the lights went out felt wrong. And I couldn't leave through the stairs. The sound had come from that direction. There was no phone signal in the basement either. I sat quietly in the corner of the room. Then I tried again, very carefully, to open the door and take a few quiet steps. But the sound came again. Footsteps. Dragging. I immediately ducked into the nearest open room and closed the door quickly, but silently. The room was completely dark. I stood still, holding my breath. Then came a strange feeling, the sense that someone else was in the room. Not because I heard anything, but my body knew, like the presence of another person, very close. With trembling hands, I pressed the home button on my phone. The screen lit up for half a second. It was enough. There was someone standing in the corner of the room, about a meter away from me. I couldn't see their face, but the silhouette was clear. Still, standing. I immediately turned off the screen. Then I heard a soft voice, barely a whisper. Shh. Someone patted my shoulder twice, then started to squeeze. I leapt for the door, pulled it open, and ran. My breath was uneven. I didn't look back. I just ran up the stairs, taking 2 steps at a time until I reached the main floor. The lights were on above. Flute music still echoed from the auditorium. I ran into the music office and found Mr. Nicholson. I told him everything, still gasping for breath. He immediately called the school security officer. They went down to the basement. I sat in the music office, waiting. About 10 minutes later, they returned. No one was down there, they said, but several instruments and large plastic bins were found in odd positions, like they'd been moved from their usual spots. That day, Mr. Nicholson canceled flute class. The 6 of us sat in the theory room while I retold what had happened. Everyone was silent. No one laughed, no one made a comment. The next day, I was called to the vice principal's office to give a full account of what happened. To this day, I still don't know who or what was down in that basement, and that room has been permanently sealed ever since. Here's the thing. Sometimes in life, things happen that make you question everything. Things that eat away at your soul, that make you doubt what you see, what you hear, and worst of all, they make you doubt yourself. I'm going to tell you one of my stories. A story that began at Southern Lehigh High School in Pennsylvania. I was a new 11th grade student. Just imagine that, being in a completely unfamiliar environment. Every hallway felt like a maze. Every laugh I heard wasn't mine. I didn't know anyone. I was completely alone. But the worst part? It happened at lunch. My school had a strict rule. Only seniors could leave campus for lunch. So I was stuck, trapped in a chaotic cafeteria, an unforgiving social battlefield. I knew I wouldn't have anyone to sit with. I knew I'd look like an outcast. And that was my biggest fear. The moment I dreaded finally came. With a lunch tray in my hands, I stepped into the chaos. I scanned every table, searching for a spot, even just a seat to sit alone. But there was nothing. Every chair was taken. Then, in the farthest corner, I saw it. A table. Just 2 people. My only hope. I walked over, my heart pounding in my chest. "Excuse me," I said, my voice hoarse. "Can I sit here?" They looked up, 2 identical pairs of eyes staring at me. They were twins, dark skin, jet black hair. There was something about them that felt out of place. But at that moment, I only saw it as a way out. They glanced at each other briefly. Then one of them, in a flat voice I still remember, said, "Yes." I sat down, a little relieved. They introduced themselves as Gabriel and Raphael. They didn't talk much, but they asked about me, and I started to feel a bit more comfortable. When the bell rang, Gabriel invited me to see a cool place after school. Why not? I needed friends. We exchanged numbers, and after school, I went straight home to drop off my bag. Not long after, my phone buzzed. A message from Raphael. He said he and Gabriel were hanging out and wanted me to come. But the location? He asked me to meet them around 9 p.m. near an old cemetery about a 10-minute walk from my house. "There's a cool hangout spot nearby," he said. A cemetery. At 9 p.m. Weird, right? But it was Friday, and I didn't have plans. I agreed. A mistake. A big mistake. When the time came, Raphael texted again. "Are you coming?" I replied. "Yeah, I'm on my way," and made sure we'd meet at the small path next to the cemetery. "Okay," he replied. I started walking, into the dark, toward that cemetery. Every step on the quiet road, every whisper of wind made my mind race. I was the new kid, a transfer. And I was walking to a graveyard in the middle of the night to meet 2 people I barely knew. A cold feeling crept down my spine. That voice inside screamed, "Turn back." But I ignored it. I arrived at the small path next to the cemetery. I texted Raphael, asking where they were. The reply came immediately. "We're already in the woods, near a small pond we want to show you." He sent the location. I hesitated, but I had come this far. I turned on my phone's flashlight and stepped into the woods. The darkness choked. Twigs cracked under my feet, creaking like bones. I called out Gabriel and Raphael's names. My voice sounded small, lost among the towering trees. Suddenly I heard it. Footsteps, software sneaking, but clear, moving toward me. I stopped. My heart pounded in my ears. I tried to joke, to ease the tension. "Don't try to kill me, okay?" But no answer, just suffocating silence. And the footsteps got faster. I realized this wasn't a joke. I had to run. Now, but it was too late. Before I could turn around, a hand grabbed my neck. The nails dug in, felt like claws of a beast. I heard Gabriel yell, "Hold him! Hold him!" I struggled with all my strength, broke free, and I ran. I ran as fast as I could back to the trail. I could feel them chasing me, their shadows darting between the trees at the edge of the woods. I ran home. My breath was ragged, my lungs on fire. I told my parents everything. My neck burned, and when I looked, red scratch marks streaked across it. My parents were shocked, furious. They almost called the police. But I had an idea. I took photos of the scratch marks, saved Raphael's messages. That was enough. We reported it to the school. With that evidence, Gabriel and Raphael were suspended from Southern Lehigh High School. My parents told me to block their numbers. Of course I did, and they made sure Gabriel and Raphael didn't know where we lived. But it didn't end there. It never ends that easily. A week later, midnight, I woke up. My room was cold, very cold. A breeze blew in. My window was wide open. I thought, maybe my mom? But that didn't make sense. The temperature was about 10 degrees Celsius that night. I walked to the window and looked down. There was a small ledge beneath it, a spot my dad once said I could use to escape during a fire. I shut the window tight, then went to my parents' room. I knocked gently. My mom asked, half asleep, "What is it?" I asked if she had opened my window. She immediately woke up completely. "No, why?" She started waking my dad to check my room, but my dad, still groggy, just said I was being paranoid. Told me to go back to bed. I went back to my room, but something was off. The door, which I had left open, was now only half closed. I slowly pushed it open, peeking inside, hoping no one was there, hoping I was imagining things. But I wasn't. I saw it, someone hiding behind the door. My scream shattered the silence of the night. A scream I'm sure the whole neighborhood heard. The door slammed shut just as my dad came running. I shouted, "There's someone in my room!" My dad kicked the door open, turned on the light, and in that moment, we saw it, a pair of legs jumping out the window. My dad rushed to the window, leaped out, tried to chase. A few minutes later, he came back, panting. No one there. In pure fear, I knew. It was Gabriel and Raphael. It had to be them. My dad called the police. I told them everything, from the woods to that night. My dad confirmed my story, but the police, as usual, couldn't do much. No solid evidence, no fingerprints. They just advised us to lock all doors and install security cameras. I spent the next few months terrified. Every night, every shadow, every tiny sound. I slept with one eye open. Thankfully, nothing like that ever happened again. Looking back now, why was I so foolish? Why did I agree to meet them in the woods at midnight so easily? I should have known. I should have seen it that day in the cafeteria. There was something wrong with them, something dark. They were trouble, and I should have stayed away. Southern Lehigh may look like an ordinary school, but for some people, it's the place where nightmares come alive. And sometimes, those nightmares don't just visit you in sleep. They wait for you, in the dark corners, behind the friendly faces. Freshman year of high school was always full of new experiences, and for me, it meant diving headfirst into a world that often felt more adult than I was ready for. It was late 2007, and a violent rainstorm was pounding the city. I found myself stuck in PE class, last period of the day. Our substitute teacher that day was a middle-aged man, his hair already graying in patches, probably in his 50s. There was something unsettling about the way he looked at me, holding eye contact just a bit too long when calling my name during roll call, sending a chill down my spine. Not to sound arrogant, but I knew my appearance often made people mistake me for someone older than a typical freshman. That day, the teacher told us to form volleyball teams and then disappeared down the hallway near the locker rooms. 40 minutes passed and finally the dismissal bell rang, signaling the end of what felt like the longest class ever. Time to change and head home. I rushed toward the locker room, but for some reason, my old locker refused to open. I kept trying the same combination over and over, but it wouldn't budge. Frustrated, I decided to find the substitute teacher, hoping he could give me a backup combination, or at least help somehow. I found him near the teacher's office, sorting through some papers. After I explained my problem, he gave me a faint smile. "Wait here, I'll grab the key list," he said. I waited outside in the now nearly empty hallway. A few moments later, he came out holding a large book, open to a specific page. To my surprise, he followed me into the girls' locker room. By then, the place was nearly empty, with only one girl still hurriedly finishing changing. We stood in front of my locker. He tried the combination listed in his book, over and over again, but the locker stayed stubbornly shut. Every time the lock wouldn't turn, he'd glance at me and let out a low, raspy chuckle. I forced a smile, trying to stay polite, but the discomfort in my gut kept growing stronger. Suddenly, his hand landed on my shoulder. "Relax, we'll get this open," he whispered, voice low. But his hand didn't move away. It slid down, slowly, to the small of my back. I jumped back, blurting out, "Sorry, I really need to go. I'll miss my bus." He tried the combination one more time, and this time the locker creaked open. He smiled again, then turned and walked out. I waited until I heard the locker room door shut behind him before quickly changing my clothes. Suddenly, the lights went out. Pitch black. My heart pounded in my chest. I fumbled around in the dark, pulling on my jeans, slamming my locker shut, grabbing my backpack. I hurried toward the back exit of the locker room, the one that led straight outside the building. Fear of that substitute teacher weighed on me like a shadow. I could almost feel his eyes watching me from somewhere nearby. As I reached the end of the locker-lined hallway at the intersection between two dark rows of lockers, I should have turned left toward the exit. But something, instinct maybe, made me glance to the right. There, barely lit by the faint glow from a small rectangular window near the ceiling, I saw it, a silhouette, peeking out from behind the other row of lockers. That was it. I ran, as fast as I could, toward the exit, bursting out into the pouring rain. I could hear him calling after me from behind. "Wait, it's not what you think." But I didn't stop. I kept running, through the darkening streets and the heavy rain, my mind in a blur. When I finally got home, soaked and shivering, a horrible realization hit me. Had he changed my locker combination on purpose, just so he could have a reason to be alone with me in the locker room? And the lights going out. I didn't even want to imagine what would have happened next. Fear and shame wrapped around me like a vice. I never told anyone. Not my parents, not my friends. It became a dark secret I carried alone for years. Even now, I still get nightmares sometimes, haunted by the memory of that stare, that touch, and that silhouette in the dark that I will never forget.